I'm Marcus Meyers. I get the opportunity to be the Chief Academic Officer here. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the role and the team that I get to work with every day and what that looks like and structures involved, especially through the lens of what I was asked to talk about, which is the concern around retaining and recruitment. And I just realized retainment is not a word in that, but retainment and recruitment and the concerns that we have about retaining good people. So as we go through that, I just want to talk a little bit about me, talk a little bit about you through the lens of what you're learning today and what you move forward in the roles that you guys play. Want to find out a little bit about the roles you play in hiring of staff and recruitment of staff and retainment, what your concerns are, and then talk a little bit around theory behind the practice that we do in West Data, theory behind some of the research evidence-based practices around teaming versus individuals and what the impact the past couple of years has had on that, and what likely contributes, again, to the curve diagram that Dr. Bubb showed you, and how we can counteract that through the lens of teaming and collaborative structures. So again, I'm Marcus. I'm a father of four, which I'm super proud about, from college to fourth grade, and my fourth grader attends a school here in West Data, which gives me a pretty unique perspective in that too, in that I also am a husband to a middle school counselor. She has tremendous numbers of stories to tell, and although we don't try to talk about work too often, I get like a couple of test subjects around what's happening and what's taking place within buildings, and I'll ask random questions, and she's learned not to ask why. Like, how many times do you see a student doing this or taking this home as you're standing out at bus duty at the end, and what does that look like for you? And so I get to learn through them as well. I've been doing similar roles in education for about 23 years, a couple of those in Boise, and then the last 21 here in West Data. I put the husband of a middle school counselor twice because I can't forget that part. I would have forgotten that had not put it twice. But I've been everything from like a paraprofessional to a teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal and a region director, which is kind of like an area soup. And then what I get to do now, and the best part of my job now, which I absolutely love, is I get to spend the entire day just talking about teaching and learning and practices and supports and structures and systems around teaching and learning and how to make that better each and every day. And my biggest job is just to maintain this relentless focus on improving teaching and learning through all the tools and resources and supports that we have available. Because before we can talk around competence of teaching and learning and bettering ourselves, there's a level of clarity behind that around the tools and supports and what those expectations look like. And that's the really great role I get to do. So my lens for today around recruitment intention is this. It's about the systems of support with the why around teachers and staff coming to us and why they're not staying with us. Like, what is the why behind whether they do or they don't in regards to that? I'm going to propose some theory behind that. And not so much talk about the structures around and strategies behind those theories, but really want to address the theories and to say, here's how those digital tools and resources can help enhance that, and what systems can be put in place to help enhance that as well. It does also address that threat diagram that Dr. Bubb talked about, well, how do we get people out of that threat stage and how do we get them away from flight and back into what we know is really going to impact their jobs and really their social, emotional health and well-being, which is why people come with us and stay with us in those roles. Again, we talked about theory of practice, but here's what I want to know from you. I saw the part at the beginning where Dr. Bubb asked like your roles and what that looks like. But here's what I want to know, and it'll kind of help drive the discussion a little bit around the direct strategies and practices. Raise your hand if you're like directly involved in the hiring and recruitment of staff. Like maybe you sit in on hiring teams, you sit on like you would supervise a team that way, so you're hiring involved. Good. Raise your hand if you're involved in a team process that usually, like if there's collaborative team structures where you work directly with team members that way. Does that make sense? So you're like, it's like an indirect portion of recruitment and retainment that way? Okay, that helps. All right, so here's some theory. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is theory, but what I will offer is at the end of it, there's a slide with my contact information, and I'd love to sit down and address what are some of the strategies we've done in West Data to counteract this, what are some of the systems that we have to support teams within that structure so people don't leave, and we'll talk about that. First of all, why are the right people leaving or not knocking? Here's some 3 possible theories behind it, and I'll back up each one of these, okay? But I think they're pretty good. I don't think anybody's going to walk away and be like, all right, he doesn't know what he's talking about. First of all, we're expected now to trust during times that can't be trusted. And that's really tough in an educational setting because of these other 2 pieces. How we define success in education now is defined for us and not with us. And that's a really tough concept, and it's really actually fairly unique to the realm of education, wherein if you define like what makes a really great retail industry, we could probably come up with a few pieces. Consistency, availability of goods and products, and what that looks like. But they tell us what that looks like through active marketing campaigns and active campaigning around their model and their structures. People in their mind, because everybody went to school at one point or another, define what success looked like in their head. And COVID instantly created a different level of how the public defines success, and they did it really without us. And it happened through no fault of our own. And so that has an impact on whether people want to come to this profession. It absolutely does. And then lastly, in the business of people, in the past couple of years, we've lost our people. And I mean that not just figuratively, but I don't mean that through like the lens of the impact of what people happen with COVID and their health and lifestyles and well-being. But we lost people as supports and advocates for education. We lost people through the lens of, is this a job I really want to do? Do I want to get paid this much to have this limited number of resources and take this much from the general public? Is this really what I want to do? Because we took it, and we took it hard for a couple of years, even though at the end, we did a phenomenal job of how we responded to COVID and what that looked like. So let's talk about trusting during times that can't be trusted. So we talked a little bit about this ever-evolving landscape of education and community, things like changing expectations and the guidelines and what parents expected as a result of remote learning and expectations versus what we could do. And then understanding between balancing what we can do resource-wise and what we can deliberately and equitably deliver to students while still being bound by financial restraints and resource constraints and how many laptops you really can roll out to kids within a certain amount of time. And the preparedness expectation we had to be prepared for a pandemic we knew was coming, but we didn't really know how it was going to roll out and impact kids that way. The spectrum of beliefs that happen, and it addressing our lowest level insecurities, and that's a lot of that spectrum curve that Dr. Bubba was talking about, where just understanding our own health and wealth and well-being and whether or not we were going to be okay and safe matriculated to how students felt that level of interaction, how our staff felt that way, and how our parents saw that. And so that all together kind of combines out with this Fearless Schools quote right here at the bottom, which is, fearless organizations are characterized by high levels of trust. Trust and psychological safety are better predictors of performance of teams than education backgrounds and personality types, which are the criteria often used to select and promote employees. And when you think through, like, what do you think about when you start within an organization? You start with the person, you have these conversations with them, but what keeps them there is that level of trust. And in the past couple of years, trust is very much eroded. And that perception of trust of schools keeps people from filling out that application and what that looks like. And so although this is a reason why behind people leaving and behind recruitment efforts that have stalled, we're going to talk about how to counteract that through a team structure here toward the end. So let's talk about another impact. The other one I talked about, defining success without our input. So overnight, the target of what schools needed to do for kids changed instantly. And the spectrum of, I want my kid back in school full-time, all the time live, and I want my kid out of school through very high-quality remote instructional practices was this enormous spectrum. And one day parents could make this decision here, and patrons, and the quality of this would be here, and then they would want this a couple months later, and then they would want this. When that comes from a recruitment and retention standpoint, like I'm a teacher willing to fill out an application, or I'm an IT tech willing to fill out an application, or I'm a supervisor willing to fill out an application for a school district, that's really tough. Because taking that level of heat and not being able to define, how do I know if I'm going to do a good job at my job, despite my paycheck, despite everything that comes with it, how do I know I'm doing a good job with that? And that's a really tough question to answer without having some additional tools and resources to drive recruitment efforts and directly market what we do to provide that for people. Lastly, I think one of the biggest ones right here, and this is what the quote speaks to, is this change agency. So within each of us is this level of like, I can change things. I have change in the world. Professionals need that. We need to know that what we do has a direct impact on some sort of change process. And whether that's a teacher in a classroom saying, if I do this, students are going to learn better, or if I create these structures, a system within our IT department, this is going to function better and create more access that way. Or if I create this digital tool and resource, that it's going to impact student learning and relationship building this way. We need to know that. Well, over the past couple of years, we lost that a little bit. Because sometimes the feeling was, no matter how much I go to change this, I could still have this mandate or I might have this taken from me, or these people might get sick, or I might not have enough subs, or this student might not show up, and really we can't count them ill. They're not going to be sick. It's pretty tough to call a parent during that time frame and say, why isn't your kid coming to school? What's the problem? Let's talk about attendance, because everybody wasn't sure. And so we lost that change agency as professionals. So it's super important that we create tools and opportunities for them to rebuild that change agency and bring that back. What was out of our control, these influences on student achievement, what was out of our control as educators, greater than ever. It was like just right up in front of our face. All of those things that frustrate us about education and student learning and what we can do, man, it was right in front of our face, and it impacted all of us. It impacted our own children, okay? Successful learning requires targeted perspectives, and it's the responsibility of all around the learner to build up, support, and develop positive perspectives in all those involved. This necessarily involves seeing oneself as a change agent. And so what John Hattie's saying is there is research behind this agency and saying with collective efficacy and what we do as leaders to build and focus teams toward a goal, some of that was lost. Because no matter what we did, the influences that negatively contributed to that kept coming at us for 2 solid years. And lastly, that statement, in the business of people, we lost our people. We went from very strong teams to really strong individuals. I do think this, though, and this is what we're going to talk about in the next slide. In the end, who in your schools came out strong? So just think through that. Like in the end, who came out strong? And what I mean strong is, at the end of the day, they said, we learned something through this. We persevered. We kept going through. Your teams where you know that person's not going to up and quit and leave. It's a really tight team. We know they're strong. They went into the trenches and they came out stronger. Think who those people were and who outlasted those challenges. So is this insurmountable? It's not. The way of getting folks back is to bring this back. From strong teams to individuals, going back. From strong individuals to incredibly strong teams. Because people in teams are going to stay in their teams. They're going to want to be a part of that team. And those recruitment efforts need to do that. Through the digital tools and applications that you guys are talking about, that's a way of promoting and retaining and sharing that word and marketing the strength of our teams within the school district and what we can do. This is somewhat, and I'm not going to go into this, I was going to pull these up really quickly and just highlight some of the key points, but these are 2 articles that were posted before COVID, obviously quite a few years before COVID, around why is teaching so difficult? And there's a list of a bunch of things, and we could go through there like why is being an IT person so difficult? Why is education so difficult? What are all the factors that make this so difficult? And if you look at both of these, and I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint if you want to see it. If you look at both of these, they're not that different. Prior to COVID, it was still hard work being an educator. It was still super hard. You had all those influences that you can't control. We're not in control of our raw goods in education. We're not. Our tools and resources, we're in control of what we purchase and the stuff. But when it comes to us, our raw goods, what we're expected to create at the end, which is a year 13 contributing member of society who wants to continue to learn through career and college success, we're not in control of the raw good we get. And so at the end, we have to manipulate that raw good all the way to the end, and that's a tough job. It was a tough job then, and it's still a tough job now. It still is. So what happened in between there? Well, COVID happened, but again, it's not so much the COVID piece, it's the fight or flight of having to do it by yourself without having the team to get you through it. Those teams that went in strong into COVID came out as strong teams coming out. And bringing people into those teams and communicating and marketing those teams is what's going to be super important as we move forward. Again, here are the draw of those collaborative teams we talk about. When we talk about recruitment and retention of teachers, like how do we get them back? And my challenge to you is digital tools can make this happen more often and much more effectively. They just can. And then that is a learning piece we learned out of COVID, which is teams that stuck together, whether that was through a Teams platform or whether that was through a shared notebook that way, when they worked together through a common format and a common structure that continued to purposely bring those teams together, those are the ones that outlasted. And I'm going to give you an example of what that looks like in West Ada, just one example we're doing over the course of the summer with recruitment and retention. So again, drawing people into collaborative teams and holding on to people that way. It's about capacity building over human capital, bringing together large groups of people rather than going and finding that one person that's just going to change it all. That person isn't there, and even if they aren't there, even if they are there, they're not going to be there very long because you can't do all that work by yourself. You just can't. And so they need to know ahead of time, once I'm hired, I'm going to be a part of something greater than myself. Instruction over initiative. We all got into this game because we wanted to improve teaching and learning to do something great for kids, right? We want to make things better for kids and for the future. Well, buying something isn't going to do that. But buying something that changes instruction where we can say this will make an impact on student learning, that's about this piece. And to do that well, it has to happen through a team. And that's how we defend ourselves against the scrutiny that's coming to us right now, okay? And then lastly, systemic culture over fragmented climate. Fragmented climate is like, boy, I feel good about myself when I go to work today. And that's a good thing. We want that. Climate are the thoughts and feelings behind the organizations we're in. Culture is our actions and our behaviors around that. And I can feel real good about getting a new job and joining a team and being a part of there. But if the actions and the systems force me to act that way, all of a sudden my actions speak louder than words. That's exactly what that culture over climate means. And so as we begin those recruitment efforts and as you bring people into your team, how those teams are structured, it's more about this is how we believe we are in an organization, and it's more about this is how we act in an organization that backs up our beliefs that way. So let's talk about one right here. And we talked about the strength of digital tools, being able to communicate those beliefs in an organization and communicate those actions and those behaviors, getting back to those team structures. Digital tools will define, create structures, and help monitor those teams better. And by monitoring, I don't mean through the lens of like, are they meeting or not meeting? I mean more like, are they a team or are they a group? Are they working together toward a common goal of accountability by which they hold each other toward measurable accountability measures? Or are they just meeting together every Wednesday morning from 7 to 8? Those are two very different things. And digital tools can help with that because of the products they help create and the connections they can create that way and the bridge that it does that. And whether that happens remotely or whether that happens distantly or whether that happens within a team setting in a room like that, it's a super important tool. And West Data has walked away learning that. Let me give you an example of this. Summer digital notebook for new hires. So we'll hire between 300 and 400 people, teachers. And I'm saying that outside of staff. I'm just saying teacher-wise. Usually it varies a little bit. We're gauging numbers of, typical, retirees and people who are leaving the system for a lot of different reasons. But that's about where we're at. Plus, we're looking at some additional kindergarten and some additional time frames that we're just going to need more people, right? And so an organization this large of, 6,500 employees, and you're looking at that, well, it'll be about 300 teachers-ish, okay? That's a lot of teachers. And here's the really weird thing about hiring in schools too, and you guys know this, I'm preaching to the crowd this way, but what I'm saying too is that we'll hire throughout the course of the months, and there's nobody for a new hire to connect to. Now that's a teacher lens. I know that some of a lot of organizations and departments you're in, they're working over the summer. But if you think of a teacher recruitment retention, if I hire somebody in June, they actually don't see anybody else until mid-August. Okay, that is really not good. If you think about that through the lens of an organization, if we were any other organization, you'd hire somebody, you'd want them getting started with your team right away. You'd do some sort of kickoff and celebration, welcome, and there'd be cake and there'd be balloons, and welcome, oh, this is such a great thing. That happens in August. So that person floats for a while and listens to messages coming from the legislatures basically for a couple of months, and then they listen to media, and then they listen to this, and they doing their own Googling, and they're searching for things, and they're like, what is happening with my school, and what do I know about this person? And they form this information source about teams. Digital tools can help create that bridge for us, and here's what we're gonna do. So what's gonna happen is, at a time frame in June, we have the dates established. Those new hires that are hired in the month of May going into June are going to come to a district kickoff and welcome. Hi, welcome, shake hands, get a balloon, do some great things. Welcome to the team. And they're going to get access to essentially a digital notebook that has videos of who the math coordinator is. Hi, I'm Patricia, and I'm here to welcome you to math teaching in West Data because we're thrilled you're here. And we're going to present a message and share. Is it the best way of doing it? I think it's pretty good for summertime. They get a face behind who they know they're going to reach out to. There's also an invitation to say if you need somebody to talk to over the summertime or you're not sure who to connect with, or you want to start looking at your curriculum, or what is West Data all about? There's a video in there for me about, here's what teaching and learning means in West Data, and I'm Marcus, and I'm the guy you get to call, not just when things hit the fan. Okay, these are the good work that we do. This is Amy Larson, our Administrator of Digital Integration, and she's the person who's here to coordinate the tool that you're using now to enhance teaching and learning. And it not just be a what-if tool for COVID, like, oh God, what if this happens again? I better have my laptop ready to go. No. Let's use it for the tool it's intended for. And so that's one example of how that bridge works, because of course we're gonna meet with them in August. There's a training in 2 days in August. We're gonna be with the people associated, and they're going to start the work of their team. But think how powerful that is to have that tool in place to say, in West Data, we care enough about you, want to get you on a team, because we want to hire the best and recruit the best. And I tell you, if I go to a recruitment fair and I say, in West Data, you're going to be hired in May, but don't worry, we're going to get you on a team and get you lots of support from day one, not in August, because we do that. So that's a good idea of how digital teams can help bridge that divide. Digital tools can help bridge that divide for recruitment and hiring that way. Outside of what we would always think, which is, websites and recruitment and all of that, it helps us convey the message of why you want to come to work with West Data rather than the options you have around you. It also helps us communicate the other pieces behind COVID, which is we came out stronger in this, and my wife would be very disappointed if somehow I didn't tie in a Dolly Parton quote into all this. She's a huge fan, and it's great. And I secretly am a very large fan too. But this is absolutely true. Digital tools can help us communicate this to people that we want to hire now and we know we're coming from, because this is a message in education we have got to get out. And I don't care if you're IT, nutrition, facilities, the maintenance dude, a third grade teacher, a high school teacher, a second grade teacher, this is the message we have to get out. We get this message out, the wonderfulness around teaching and learning and what it means to be a school teacher and work in a school and support kids in the future of America, that's those deep roots that we can embed back there. We got a little shaken. There's a little tree branching and popping here and there. A few squirrels fell out of the tree, but we're going to be okay. We'll weather the storm, and we're going to come out much stronger in the end of it. And she's absolutely right, as Dolly is on a whole lot of other things too. All right? This is my contact information. I'd be more than happy to share this slide if you want it, and I can distribute that. Just shoot me an email this way. If you want to call me, you can call me that way to talk about some of the specific strategies and structures we have in place in West Data to build teams and keep people with us and ask for people to knock on our door to come with us. Okay? All right. Any questions? Thoughts? I know that was quick, but I talk fast with things I'm excited about. Okay. You guys be good to yourselves, okay? Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for hanging out here. All right, thank you.